Well, rival U.S. presidential candidates Donald Trump and Kamala Harris are making last-minute stops in key swing states ahead of this week's election. To tell us more, we're now joined by our Global Affairs Editor John Lyons, who is in Washington for us, giving us a broad view of what's actually happening in these last days of campaigning for the two candidates. John, yesterday we spoke to the director of YouGov polling, and their numbers are pointing to Democrat candidate Kamala Harris winning the popular and the electoral vote as well. What is the vibe in Washington at the moment?
Well, Fauzia, I think that the sense of Americans is that this is an extremely important election, whichever side you're on, or if you're not on any side. There's a real sense here of anticipation, of excitement. It's a huge democracy here that when it gets to the wheels circling, starts to kick into shape. Washington, D.C., where I am, has been heavily fortified around the Capitol. And I think some Americans are both excited and anxious. I think there's a certain concern when you speak to people that they worry that, you know, given the Capitol riots a couple of years ago, that there may be some sort of upheaval or chaos or violence. So a mixture of anticipation, excitement, and some concern.
Now, we have seen that campaigning seems to be getting to Donald Trump. You know, he took his frustration out on a microphone that wasn't working in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, during a rally there. What is the Trump team's strategy in these last few days ahead of the election?
Well, Fauzia, the Trump team's strategy is to keep hammering the two big issues that they believe are winners for them. They believe that they can get back into the White House on the basis of the economy, cost of living, which is very tough here, like it is in Australia. Middle Americans, like middle Australians, are doing it really hard. Although the stock markets are near record high, the average American worker who has a job, and many do not have a solid or reliable job, they're doing it really tough. Things are very expensive in the United States. And so Donald Trump is emphasising the cost of living, saying he can manage the economy better than Kamala Harris, and border security, particularly that southern border with Mexico, over which Kamala Harris, as vice president, was seen as having oversight. In contrast, on the Democrat side, Kamala Harris is continuing hard to run on the issue of a woman's reproductive rights, particularly abortion, which of course is a massive issue in this country, has been for decades. And also she's now trying to pivot back towards the economy. Every speech she makes now, she's much more emphasising tax cuts. She's saying she'll give tax cuts to 100 million Americans. And I think the Democrats realise that's a weakness for her, and she's trying to make up for that weakness. As to the polls, really nobody knows. We may, in fact, although the election is on Wednesday Australian time, we may not know the result until at least next weekend. It may take 3 or 4 days before we know who's the next president.
John, you know, the main show, of course, is the presidential campaign and the presidential election, but the winner, of course, will have to work with Congress in order to ensure that their promises, whatever promise they make on the campaign, is actually delivered. How is the race? Well, how are the races for the Senate and the House of Reps shaping up?
Well, some observers here think that, you know, there could be a flipping of control of those houses, but the reality is that really, like with the presidential race, nothing's really clear. And I think the reason for that is pollsters have been burnt in the past, and they're trying to keep their questions much more focused and less broad. And also, I think that a lot of people are not necessarily telling the pollsters which way they're going to vote. there's a real sense here that some people might be going to vote for Donald Trump, but when the pollster rings them at home at night, they don't particularly want to admit that in front of their families or their children or their partner who may not support Trump. So there's a sense that there may be, they're calling it the shy Trump votes. So really, Fauzia, we do not know how the Senate, the House or the White House will go.
All right. John Lyons, our Global Affairs Editor, speaking to us from Washington, D.C. Thank you. And we will have full coverage of the US election here on the ABC News Channel. Do join us for the count from 10 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time this coming Wednesday, the 6th of November.